This is from ngacole.com, the history of tribal warfare in Nigeria. The history of tribal warfare dates back centuries. The tribal visions in ancient Nigeria causes a lot of warfare between the different groups. Slave traded several hundred years ago. Nigerian tribes fight amongst each other 100 years. Says competing tribes would capture tribal members from other areas to sell them to the Europeans, collecting slaves to bring back to the colonies. So what you see here is that the slaves were being sold by the Igbos, and this is where the Uncle Toms come from, the Fulani scum. You understand what I'm saying? Now, understand the different factions, understand how it works, understand why some people are making bombs and throwing them at each other, and crude oil, and how people learn from each other's tactics. And you have to understand all these things and understand the bloodlines as well. And understand, right now I'm trying to find you, some pictures, who the bitches are. Speaking of the bitches, this is one of the bitches right here. One of the bitches right here. This guy, he passed away. He caused a lot of damage. Yardua. Let's see what else can I give you here. You see, remember it starts with this guy, and the knowledge was being stolen, really by the Europeans, including the people in the Middle East. A lot of Middle Eastern people were starting to develop ideas, things like this. The Ismail line, okay? A lot of the Muslims, the people who evolved into the Muslim tribes, the descendants of Ishmael. Remember I showed you about all that. Here is a map of African dictators. That's what I was looking for. You won't believe how many fucking pictures I have in these folders. That's why I love the way these scumbags, they try to they try to justify some of the surveillance they do on me and some of the interception of electronic correspondence. They try to justify by saying I say a lot of harsh things. I talk about building bombs. I talk about funding insurgents in Nigeria. I talk about being a member of the Crip gang and things that a lot of different agencies want to figure out more about. And I say, look, I know that you're watching me, and there's nothing I have that you want that you can find. I guarantee that. Okay? So it's just annoying to me that, for me to express myself, that all these people are going to watch me. But anyway, if you look at where the dictators are, what country is left out of this picture? Nigeria. Remember I showed you in the last one that Nigeria has the most cultures, most empires. This is the key. If you're going to do anything in Africa, you'd have to do it in several places. One is the place historically that resists you the most, which is over here. What country is over here? You can't read it well that well. I can't read it well either, but it's Somalia. This is Ethiopia. And then you have Djibouti and Eritrea on the northeastern African side as well, and you have Sudan. Okay, so when I say the Eritreans, the Sudanese, and the Ethiopians were part of the Egyptian Empire, which spreads all the way out here to the Middle East, and it spreads down here, it goes down here, it goes to here. Remember, it follows the Nile. The Egyptians want to run everything along the Nile, and the source of the Nile is important to them, so a lot of the original Egyptians migrated toward the source. They were more interested in the source of the power than in the trade routes. The trade routes were occupied by the Temple of Seti, who's interested in that kind of thing for his, wicked ways. And a lot of the good guys, the Temple of Heru, over here towards Sudan, Temple of, I told you about the Valley of the Kings, and, as you go up, and I'm not going to get into all these structures, but most of the structures are down here until you get to the Giza up there, and then the Delta is above Giza. So basically, the people who wanted to control the empire and who were attempting to invade were coming from here, and the empire is really being ran from Thebes, which is further down. It's more, I'd say, Thebes is by Esna, for instance, but it's above Esna, and Esna is considered Upper Egypt, which is the bottom part of Egypt. So we're talking lower into Africa. So that's where that's where the headquarters of many of the priest castes that ran Egypt, and the center of Egypt was until, and then you have key cities like Saqqara, and then of course Akhenaten moves out to Armana in the desert, and then you have the Jews moving out to Israel over here, and you have the Hittites over here, and you have, the Arab tribes over here. You have Iran, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Kakistan. As you go up to the Caucasus Mountains, by Kakistan, and in Georgia and Russia and such. So, if you understand the whites were way over here in this white land, this has nothing to do with it. This would probably be more like Egypt. Israel, and Israel would connect it, and the Red Sea would come between it. So, what you have here is, and then over here you have Benin and Togo and Ivory Coast and, Ghana, and then you go all the way up to, Sierra Leone over here, and etc. So, this is the West Africa. This is where all the Africans went who didn't go over here. So the ancient Egyptians either ended up here, and basically either ended up in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, Nigeria, Chad, Niger. Okay, this is where it ends really. Niger over here and Nigeria. We're talking about eastern Nigeria, northeastern Nigeria is where a lot of the descendants were, and then they migrated to southeastern Nigeria. And the Arabs came, when I talk about the Fulani and the Yorubas, the trade routes down, they follow the Sahara, and they have to do with Niger and, over here, and it reaches down here, right? These guys, they tapped into that trade route. And that's, of course, why you have Timbuktu in West Africa, because there was not just important centers in Egypt and Alexandria, and in, the other Alexandria in Rome as well, but it was also an important center in Timbuktu over here. And remember the Lemba, they come down and they migrate down to South Africa, etc. And remember Nambia down in down in southern Africa, you have Nambia. Okay, basically you have Angola, and by Angola you have Zaire and then Congo. Basically that's the old name for it. And you go on to Nambia. See, I'm pretty sure this is Nambia, okay? Because it ends like right there. It should be under Angola, and I'm just not used to seeing it there. And South Africa should be below there, so it just looks a little weird the way they have it sliced. But anyway, so Nambia is where they found the fossils. They're 760 million years old. And Ethiopia is important too, is where you have the Ethiopian Jews, and Amos 9:7, Ethiopia in the Bible. And you have Sudan. Remember, Sudan was part of ancient Egypt. It was an empire that spread out from basically the source of the Nile, in Uganda and Ethiopia and those areas. And you have them going all the way up here, right? So all these places like Rwanda and Uganda right next to each other, and these places are important because of their proximity to the Nile. And Sudan and Ethiopia's proximity to the source of the Egyptian knowledge, the temple at Edfu, the temple at Abu Simbel, Lake Nasser, on and on, Aswan. These are the important parts, and then Thebes is above it. So really you have, the way Egypt is laid out is that you have the important stuff down here, and then the center right about here is where they run it from. Then up here is basically the trade places and where they hold down the fort. You have big old pyramids. You have forts also in other places to take some of the brunt too from invading armies. And the pyramids themselves are part their forts, so they can migrate down to their ancestral land, or they can fight. And that's the same thing the Igbos do. They can migrate further into Africa, to their ancestral land, or they can stay and fight. That's what was going on in the Civil War. I'll end it right there. Thank you.